our Eastern St. Clair County Area of Interest meeting tonight. We're glad you're here. One of the questions we've been asked already, will we provide copies of the slides that we're using tonight? Absolutely. So if you're trying to scribble notes or trying to take pictures or whatever, you might know that we will get you copies. To do that, though, we'll have to have an email address for you. So if you didn't sign in, please do so before you leave for the night. Another issue we have is we only have this room till 8 o'clock. So if we start running into that hard stop, if you still have questions, we'll move out into the hallway so that you can get your questions answered. So my name is Mike Jury. I'm with MPART, which is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, and I'm the state's PFAS specialist. So our agenda tonight is I'll be doing the introductions. We have an overview by me about MPART. Health will be covered by Rachel Bauer, and we'll be talking about our investigation areas that we're working on. And under that, we'll talk a little bit about Technicom, and we'll talk about biosolids. We'll talk about Eat Safe Fish Guides, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So we hope tonight, some of the goals we have for you is to give you information about surface water impacts from PFAS and some of the confirmed sources in the area. We'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Thompson Pond investigation, and we're hoping that somebody in the room has some information on Thompson Pond. You saw something, you heard something. We're running into some issues trying to figure out what's going on there. So we're hoping maybe some of you have seen something that you can help us. We'll talk a little bit about residential well sampling we've done, and we'll also talk about fish advisories. So what is MPART? As I said, it's the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, and it was formed under Governor Snyder, and then it was reaffirmed under Governor Whitmer by an executive order. We have a unique multi-agency approach. We have 7 different state departments that put time and effort into their working with us, MPART, doing PFAS work. So we coordinate and get cooperation amongst all the different levels of government, and we direct the implementation of the state's strategy. So MPART sounds like a big deal. There's 5 of us, so 5 of us trying to work all these different things across the state. So one of the things you said, 7 departments, what departments are those? So some of them are pretty obvious. Natural resources, dealing with fish and wildlife. Agriculture, dealing with food in Michigan. Our local health department partners are a huge part of what we do. The military. Military? Yeah, we have military facilities in Michigan, and some of those military facilities have PFAS problems. Our public health department does a lot with us. Eagle, for the environmental parks, we're all familiar with what we're doing. Now, LARA, you think about LARA, wow, LARA, what do they do? So LARA is the state fire marshal, and the state fire marshal works with fire departments and helps us deal with the AFFF or aqueous film forming foam. And our last department, we'll work with MDOT. That's another one people scratch their heads. MDOT. Well, if we're rebuilding highways, we want to make sure that there's no PFAS contamination that could cause problems. So we work with MDOT, and MDOT also has the Bureau of Aeronautics, which are all their airports in Michigan. And unfortunately, we have PFAS problems at airports. So just a quick little science lesson. What is PFAS and what are they? So they have really strong carbon-fluorine bonds. They're the strongest bonds in nature. And they could be surfactants, they could be detergents. They're highly stable. You've probably heard them called the forever chemicals. And then they repel water, oil, fat, and grease. They can do all those things. They began being developed in the 1940s. Actually, they were developed as part of the Manhattan Project. Through happenstance, a scientist working for DuPont discovered Teflon. So from there, we went to where we are today. So there are thousands, literally thousands of these PFAS compounds out there. And so they are widespread through the ecosystem. They do not break down very easily. And if they do break down, they break down into stuff that a lot of times is even worse. So they do bioaccumulate. They bioaccumulate in fish. They can build up in our bodies. Some of the PFAS chemicals that are out there can affect health. There is some emerging science and information about it. There's a lot of research going on. And so this is an area that people are really working on to figure out. There is a need for additional federal standards. There is an argument over what standards there should be. EPA proposed some drinking water standards and walked some of those standards back, but there are still two standards they have for PFOA and PFOS out there. What are some of the uses of PFAS? I would say that if I was able to go into your home, I would probably find PFAS throughout your house. Hard to believe because the labels don't tell you anything, unfortunately. So it can be, we all have heard about the popcorn bags that have PFAS in them. Carpeting can have PFAS in it. Cleaning products for carpet, non-stick cookware, that's pretty famous. Car seats, firefighting foam, aerosols, markers, just a lot of different things. Unfortunately, cosmetics have a lot of PFAS in them, and so do other things that we use. I was quite amazed that recently they're now marketing an eye drop. If you have a dry eye or you don't get a lot of tears in your eyes, there's actually a product now with PFAS in it that you put into your eyes, and it keeps the moisture on your eyeball. So just another amazing thing. They decided, hey, this is good stuff, so we'll allow you to put it in your eye. So one of the things that I like to point out to folks is the cycle of PFAS. So one of the things that happens is that we have a manufacturing plant up here producing something, and they might use PFAS. They could be painting things, they could be cleaning things, and as part of what they make, they emit PFAS. So if they spill something, that could go down into groundwater. It can go to the wastewater treatment plant, which unfortunately never was designed to take PFAS out, and it wasn't designed to take pharmaceuticals out. So wastewater treatment plants don't do a very good job of dealing with that. So that can go and be discharged to a stream, lake, or river. The sludge can go up to the landfill because it has to go somewhere. So when you are using your facilities in your home, you flush the toilet, it goes somewhere. And when it goes to the wastewater treatment plant, they have to do something with it. So the sludge can go to there, or they can be turned into biosolids applied to a farm field. And then food products, we show that. We don't think that's a huge problem. We don't see that very much, but it could happen. So it can get into our drinking water. We have drinking water wells in Michigan. One of the interesting things about Michigan was we probably have more drinking water wells than any other state in the union. We have over 1 million, maybe 1,200,000 drinking water wells in Michigan. That seems hard to believe, but we have that many in this state. So there can be firefighting foam from a car accident or at an airport, and we get just a big cycle. So the landfill has leachate that comes off of it, which goes back to the wastewater treatment plant. So there's a big cycle. You probably, when you were going to school, you saw the deal about water. You know how water cycles through the atmosphere, falls as rain, goes into the rivers, stuff. So we have that cycle with PFAS too. So obviously, if it's this big of a problem, what is Michigan doing about it? So one of the main things we want to do is protect public health. And we do that in a multitude of ways. We investigate where PFAS is in the environment, looking at drinking water, groundwater, water bodies. So every municipal water supply in Michigan has been sampled for PFAS. We did that early on. And so starting back 2017, 2018, we went through and got every major metropolitan, well, not even major, every drinking water source in Michigan. We've developed and we enforce standards for PFAS in surface water, drinking water, and groundwater. And those standards get modified as the science evolves. And one of the things we're doing, like tonight, we educate the public, and that's to help prevent future contamination and minimize the use of PFAS. So one of the things we hope is that as pressure is brought to bear on companies, they'll put labels on things and let you know what is in what you're buying, because most of the time you don't know. So what are those standards that I was talking about? So fortunately, when you look at our drinking water and groundwater cleanup standards, they're the same. and we regulate 7 different compounds in Michigan. And those are similar ones that the EPA was attempting to regulate. We also have surface water quality values that are over on the right-hand side, and you can see those are different than the cleanup standards for drinking water and groundwater. So we do a lot of lakes and streams investigation. So we look at lakes, and then we also sample fish. So we do a lot of that throughout the state. So part of what we're going to talk about tonight is sampling that we have done in the Port Huron area. So how many sites are you investigating? What are you looking at? What are you doing? This is a map right now that was valid as of September 30th, and we'll be adding a couple more PFAS sites to the map. So if it's a triangle, it's a PFAS site. If it's a circle, then it's what we call an area of interest. What is the difference? So a site is a place where there's groundwater contamination. We've sampled it, it's come, or somebody else has sampled it, and there's a monitor well there, and it's above criteria. And we know what the source is. If it's an area of interest, like here, we have problems. We've taken samples and we found things above criteria, but we don't know what the sources might be. We have an idea for a couple of them, but not all of them. And you can see that throughout the state, we have almost every county. So I make the joke that before I retire, we will have a PFAS site in every county, 83. So I've got a ways to go, but we do have a lot of them. Now, you look at that and you think, my gosh, Michigan, why are we so contaminated? We're not any more contaminated than any other industrial state. The difference is we've worked very hard to try to figure out where our problems are, what contamination sites we have. So we do have that out there. Other states have not done much of anything to look at the problems. We're one of the first states to look at airports. So we've looked at every commercial airport in the state of Michigan and looked at those. So the investigations we do, we based on known or suspected sources and potential for exposure. One of our main jobs is to protect the drinking water pathway. And so we have other investigations underway that aren't even on the map yet. One of the things that I want to point out that I think is really important for the public is to use our website. There is so much information there that a person can find, and a lot of times you'll have questions and you'll find the answers are on the website. So some of the things you can find is PFAS 101. We have a recording there, a couple of them that are done that'll give you information on PFAS. And we try to make them easily understandable by anybody. There are frequently asked questions. We get asked a lot of questions. Those are on there. If you're interested in one of those sites, you can look up, and there are a summary there for the investigations. Also, our public meeting calendar. So this meeting, for example, is on that calendar. One of the really important things that I really like is the GIS system. So let's say you have a cottage up north and you're up by Oak Lake or somewhere. You can actually go on here and click that area, and you'll find out if there are PFAS sources nearby. You can find out what water we've tested. So there's just a lot of information there. So if you're interested in an area, let's say you think, well, the UP, what can be up there? So you can actually click on the map and see the different sites that we have up there. An opportunity for the public to get involved with this is our Citizens Advisory Work Group. And that's residents from impacted communities, and Port Huron would be an impacted community. And one of the charges we give to the work group is help us understand how to engage and empower our community. We're scientists. We're not the world's greatest communicators. We're really good talking to ourselves using acronyms, things that you don't understand. We're trying to keep those out of tonight's talk. So that's one of the things we heard, make it simpler. You guys talk this jargon, PFAS, what's that mean? Or you're talking different compounds. So then also they recommend, how can you help educate the general public? Because not everybody's a scientist. Not everybody has time to read all the research that I have to do. So if you were interested in becoming a COG member, you can read the COG charter, and that's online on our website. And you can submit a registration form to join the COG. It meets usually the second Tuesday of every month. And depending on what's going on, sometimes if it's voting day, for example, which falls on the second Tuesday, we might move the meeting, or if there's a holiday or something. So those are really an important group to us because they help us understand your needs as the public and how we can do education for you. So I'm going to turn the talk over to PFAS and health, and Rachel is going to talk about that. Step up right there.
So hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm the toxicologist from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. My contact information. Can you try?
Hey, Rachel, can you
Is it
speak up a
not-
little bit? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Little low quiet speaker. Okay. So again, my name is Rachel. I'm a toxicologist from Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. This is my contact information if you have any questions. So during a PFAS health response, the role of MPHHS is to understand the health concerns facing your community. We work with the local health department and EGLE to develop a plan to investigate and address those health concerns. EGLE usually leads the site investigation, while we and the local health department will lead the public health planning and the response. We also evaluate PFAS exposures to residents and will recommend public health actions as they are needed. So here I'm just going to explain a little bit how you might be exposed to PFAS. The primary exposure pathway is through ingestion. So this can happen through a few different ways. One is through drinking contaminated water. Another is from ingesting fish caught from contaminated water by PFAS. So PFAS, particularly PFOS, can accumulate in fish. And so because of that, we at MDHHS have developed the Eat Safe Fish guidelines. These guidelines are specific to a water body and certain species from those water bodies. And the fish are tested for PFAS as well as other contaminants, and then we provide guides on how much of the fish is safe for you to eat based on the levels of that contaminant. So I'm not going to talk about those guides, but Lisa is here with us today, and she's going to talk a little bit about how to understand the Eat Safe Fish guides and what Eat Safe Fish guidelines we have in place for the St. Clair County. Another way you can be exposed is through incidental ingestion of contaminated soil or dust. So this is a more common exposure pathway for infants or children just due to the hand-to-mouth behavior. Another is through eating food packaged in materials containing PFAS. So it may have been mentioned before, but PFAS are maybe in like food packaging, so fast food wrappers and such. They can be in those types of materials and they through them and contaminate food. Another is through using consumer products, as Mike mentioned, anything that's stain resistant, water repellent, waterproof, those types of products. You can be using those, and that's another pathway. But it's important to note that PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern. So it's okay to use the water for your household uses, such as doing dishes, washing your clothes, showering, and bathing. The primary concern is when you're ingesting the PFAS. So we talked a little bit about the sources. I'm going to kind of explain how we understand exposure. So this figure here is showing a summary from a collection of studies that was completed by the CDC. So on the so CDC has several studies from starting in 1999 to 2000 all the way up till 2018. And in these studies, what they're doing is measuring the PFAS in the blood of the US population. So the general population levels of PFAS. And they're measuring the most common PFAS that most people are exposed to. So on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, you'll see the 8 years, the range. So the first one is 1999 to 2000. It goes all the way across from 2017 to 2018. Each one of those time periods is an individual study that we have a sample from the US population that we measured in their blood. And on the y-axis or the vertical axis is showing the average blood PFAS concentration. And each line is showing you the average PFAS concentration for that particular PFAS in that given year. So the top line, which is green, is showing you PFOS. The next one, which is blue, is PFOA. Following that is PFHXS, and the one on the bottom is PFA. So each dot is showing you the average PFAS concentration from 2000 all the way up to 2018. And so the big takeaway from this figure is that we know that most people have some level of PFAS in their blood. And we also are seeing a trend, a downward trend, that people are having less PFAS in their blood. So we are attributing most of this decline due to a phase out of PFOS and PFOA, which started around 2002, 2004, where they were slowly phased out. As you can see, due to the phase out, they're not being used, they're less likely in the environment, we are less exposed, meaning are less absorbed in our blood. So you can see that as you get towards 2017, 2018, the average levels of those PFAS are much lower than what they were 20 years ago. Okay. So this slide is kind of summarizing some of the health effects that have been associated with PFAS exposure, particularly PFOA and PFOS. So this includes reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, some decreases in infant birth weight, as well as high cholesterol, specifically total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol. Additionally, we have seen thyroid disease, liver damage, reduced immune system response to vaccines, and then an increased risk for developing certain types of cancer, including kidney and testicular cancers, particularly for PFOA exposure. And I would just like to add that having PFAS in your blood or being exposed to PFAS does not mean that your current health or future health effects are due to PFAS exposure. So this is my last slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Anne.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, I'm Anne Tavalier. I'm the lead for this area of interest investigation. And so within the area of interest, we kind of have three or four different things going on. And we're going to cover industrial sites with known PFAS use, surface waters impacted by PFAS, and then the William P. Thompson Common. So the Smiths Creek landfill and the closed Fort Gratiot landfill and the former Dunn paper facility were identified by the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant as industrial sources of PFAS back in 2018. And since that time, Smiths Creek landfill has installed treatment to reduce the amount of PFAS that's being discharged to the wastewater treatment plant. The closed Fort Gratiot landfill, they've stopped discharging to the wastewater treatment plant back in 2019. And then Dunn paper stopped discharging to the wastewater treatment plant in 2022 when they ceased operations. And in Port Huron, the wastewater treatment plant also identified autoanotics and the former Domtar paper as industrial sources of PFAS back in 2018. And since then, autoanotics has installed treatment to reduce PFAS being discharged to the treatment plant, and the former Domtar paper stopped discharging in 2022 when they ceased operations. And I want to note that Eagle is also working with autoanotics and the new owner of the Domtar site, Port Huron Multimodal Hub LLC, to address PFAS in stormwater and their wastewater discharges through orders with a compliance program and ongoing monitoring. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Cynthia Poslowski with Eagle's Remediation and Redevelopment Division, and she's the site lead for Technicom.
As Anne said, my name is Cindy Poslowski. I'm the Eagle Project Manager for Technicom. most of you are probably familiar with the site, but in case you're not, it's a composting facility here in Port Huron, located on Dove Road, just west of Michigan Road. In the past, Technicom accepted paper waste from Downtar. That paper waste contained PFAS, and that's what contributed to the contamination at the site. So that paper waste was mixed in with other compost and soil, and it was put into piles. This is the approximate size and location of those piles on the property. So that paper waste also contaminated the surface water. This is showing Huffman Drain, which is a series of ditches running through the site. The highest concentrations are over on the eastern side, where like the two biggest piles are located. The highest concentrations being just over 71,000 per PFOA and just over 1,000 per PFOs. So this, because of the PFAS contamination from the Downtar paper, Eagle took legal action, and we entered into a settlement with Downtar. That settlement became final in June of this year. In that settlement, Downtar has to remove all of those soil piles from the site. They need to sample those sediments from the Huffman Drain. And the contaminated soil is going to be taken to, they must remove those piles. It's going to be taken to a hazardous waste facility in Ontario, Canada. And there's going to be a sum of money that they're going to pay up to Eagle to address anything that comes up once Downtar is done with their work out there. They are currently working out there. So they have done the sediment sampling. We don't have the results of that yet. They have removed a lot of the overgrowth to make those piles accessible for removal. And they are actually removing the piles. So a couple of slides. When I was out there today, that pile, there's the two piles. The pile to the west, that's gone now. So, and they're working on that pile to the east, the northern part of it. So they're making really good progress out there. On this slide, we also have a couple of links for more information on the site. The top link is going to take you to our database, which has the files for the site. The most recent file is going to be have their work plan. It details the work that they are doing out there right now. And then the bottom link is support and more information. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christian Smith to talk a little bit about biosolids.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Christian Smith. I'm with the Emerging Pollutants section of the Eagle in the Water Resources Division, and I am the statewide contact for PFAS and biosolids. So before we get into more of some of the known sources for the surface water contamination in this county, I want to get us all on the same page because I'll be using the term biosolids. So biosolids, so any facility that where sanitary sewage or domestic sewage goes through a treatment works has the ability to produce biosolids. An important point of that is the word that's here that as long as the flow is mainly sanitary sewage. So if a treatment works or a wastewater treatment plant is receiving mainly processed wastewater or wastewater from industry, that facility is not producing biosolids at that point. So like paper pulp, things like that are not considered biosolids. But if they're primarily treating sanitary sewage or domestic sewage, the facility can produce biosolids. So that formal definition there is what we have in the state rules. So it's any solid, semi-solid, or liquid residue that's generated during the treatment of sanitary sewage that is considered biosolids after it's gone through that further treatment and is able to be land applied under our state rules. And then just again to highlight, solids from industrial waste are not considered biosolids. So those paper pulps, materials like that are regulated under other programs. Today, I'm going to be talking about just those further treated solid material that comes from the processing of sanitary sewage. So in the county, there are 3 main areas that have surface water contamination that are linked with the historic land application of biosolids from the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant. So in the 1980s, the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant was receiving high levels of PFOS from a paper mill from one of the industrial users in their collection system. And the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant luckily had kept records of land application dating back to the 1980s. And we have gone through and done some extensive surface water sampling, and we found that there appears to be in this northern area, central area, and southern area, the high surface water concentrations are in association with this legacy land application of these industrially impacted biosolids. So these biosolids from the 1980s that were heavily impacted by PFOS that was being discharged from a paper mill. We have found that in relatively close proximity to these land application fields, we are finding elevated levels of PFOS in the surface water. So this is all about the historic land application of these biosolids are contaminated in the 80s. The biosolids today, just to juxtapose here, we started testing for PFAS and biosolids, or requiring testing for PFAS and biosolids starting in 2021. We had done some work through some of our wastewater treatment plant work and identified certain treatment plants that had elevated amounts of PFAS in their biosolids, and we implemented a strategy for how those biosolids can be reused depending on PFAS concentrations within the biosolids. So to highlight, since we put our strategy in place, we haven't had any industrially impacted biosolids land applied since 2018. So that industrially impacted term, so right now we have that set at 100 parts per million for PFOS and PFOA. Some back of the envelope calculations for what we assume some of the concentrations could have been in the 80s in those biosolids were orders of magnitude higher than what we're regulating at now. So now we have a upper threshold of 100 parts per billion. Some back of the envelope calculations, the best we could do for some of the biosolids that were land applied in the 80s for potentially around that 40 parts per million point. So an order of magnitude plus more concentrated than the biosolids that are being land applied today. And then yes, to highlight, so Eagle has identified high concentrations of PFAS in surface waters in those 3 blue boxes here, and there's some more information on the maps printed out over there, where these historic land application of biosolids led to this link between the historic biosolids and potential runoff, leading to elevated surface water concentrations in the area. We have a link here to learn more about what we're doing related to PFAS and biosolids, but to get into some more to the other area with elevated surface water. So I'm going to hand that back to Ann, our lead.
Thanks, Christian. All right, now to William P. Thompson Pond. So we collected fish from this pond as part of a grant Eagle received to assess contaminants in fish from water bodies that have youth fishing events. And so Thompson Pond was one of those. And the PFAS concentrations, the PFOS concentrations in the fish triggered a do not eat advisory for all fish species. And the results of the fish really came as a surprise to us, since there are no known PFAS sites in the area, and there's no history of industrially impacted biosolids applied near the pond. And so because of the fish results, we have gone out to collect surface water samples in the various tributaries upstream and downstream of Thompson Pond as a way to figure out potential source of PFAS. And the surface water results for this area they look different from the rest of the area of interest because we're seeing elevated PFOA in the surface water in addition to the elevated PFOS. And so we do have a larger map printed out on the side here, which show the results of PFOS and PFOA if you're interested in taking a closer look after the meeting. Whoa. So at this time, we aren't sure of the source or sources that's causing the high PFAS levels in the surface water. The results leave us kind of thinking that there may have been a large scale application of some sort of PFAS material. And so we've been told that the subdivisions in those areas north of the freeway were built in the late 1970s, early 80s. And so we're wondering if during the 70s, 80s, or 90s, in that area around Thompson Pond, were there any fires? Were that firefighting foam that Mike was talking about may have been used? Or any applications of soil amendments to the area, like paper sludge or biosolids, or just any, general land use practices that you can remember. That's really why we're seeking your help to try to help identify the sources here. So, as you're racking your brain, you guys are the ones that live here, this area. You can contact me directly via phone or email. You can also call our Peace hotline if you're more comfortable with providing information anonymously. Really any tips and information is really appreciated. So in response to those surface water concentrations and then the various site investigations we've done throughout the county for PFOS, we have sampled 48 residential drinking water wells. And the great thing is that the results have been non-detect for all PFAS analyzed. And so we're not finding impacts to the deep aquifer, and that's likely due to that really extensive clay layer that's here in the county. So that clay layer is providing kind of a block for any of that PFAS in the surface layer, the surface water to make its way down to the aquifer. And then for anybody here or online who are connected to a municipal system, we wanted to provide you with that information regarding the water supply systems within this area of interest. There are 3 main community water supplies associated with the area of interest. So the Great Lakes Water Authority, Lake Huron facility, the city of Marysville, and the city of Port Huron. And then there's also a smaller community water supply at the Sunrise Mobile Home Park and a non-community water supply system at the Love's Travel Center on Wadhams Road. All of these water supplies do conduct PFAS compliance monitoring and are currently on an annual sampling schedule. And another great thing is that past results have been non-detect for the PFAS analyzed for. So looking ahead, we plan on conducting additional surface water sampling in 2026 in those areas in Thompson Pond. We're not sure what the source is unknown. So like Christian said, we can attribute most of the high surface water levels that we're seeing to historical biosolids, industrially impacted biosolids, but there are some areas where we see these elevated concentrations, but we don't have a industrially impacted biosolids site nearby. So we'll be looking at that closely. We'll follow up on any information gained from folks about Thompson Pond. And we just encourage residents to visit the Eastern St. Clair County Area of Interest website to learn more. The link is provided. The website has a table with all the fish sample results. So giving some context when Lisa talks about the safe fish guides, as well as reports from our previous water sampling efforts. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa. Sort of.
Hi, I'm Lisa Fisher. I am also a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and I work in the Eat Safe Fish program. So I'm just going to give an overview of some of the fish consumption guidelines that we have here in St. Clair County. So this map, I know it's hard to see up here, but each of those outlines of fish are areas where Eagle has collected fish for the Eat Safe Fish program. And they align with areas where we've had elevated levels of PFAS in surface water. Also wanted to note that this year, the Eat Safe Fish program updated their fish consumption screening values for PFOS. So they're about 6 times lower than they were previously. So our new do not eat threshold for issuing a do not eat advisory for fish is set at 49.6 parts per billion for PFOS. So I did include all of the water body specific fish consumption guidelines that we have for the entire county. Because most of these were driven by the surface water and subsequent fish sampling that was done for this area of interest. So I'm just going to kind of go through when fish were collected from each of these water bodies and whether or not they were tested for PFAS. So in 2023 for the Bell River, yellow perch, rock bass, and bluegill were collected. And as you can see, most of the fish consumption guidelines are driven by the levels of PFOS that were found in those fish. Moving on to the Black River, this is downstream of Ford's Dam. Fish were collected in 2022 and included collections of yellow perch, rock bass, suckers, sunfish, as well as largemouth bass and smallmouth bass. And all of the fish consumption guidelines are driven by PFOS. For Birch Creek, rock bass were collected in 2022, and there is currently a do not eat advisory due to the elevated levels of PFOS. For the Fort Gratiot Nature Preserve Pond, bluegill were collected in 2020. Those levels were also elevated to issue a do not eat advisory. For Fort Gratiot Pond, bluegill and other sunfish species were collected in 2019. For those fish, the levels of PFOS and mercury are both driving the fish consumption guidelines that we have. For the Howe Drain, rock bass were collected in 2020. And again, the levels of PFOS warranted issuing a do not eat advisory. For Lake St. Clair, we've been including Lake St. Clair in our fish consumption guidelines for a long time. In 2012, walleye from St. Clair and connecting water bodies were tested for PFAS. And then in 2017, bluegill and other sunfish species, as well as largemouth bass, were also tested for PFOS. So we do have guidelines for those species that are either entirely or partially driven by PFOS. But there are other legacy contamination issues for Lake St. Clair. And so that's currently what is driving some of the fish consumption guidelines for those other species that have not been tested for PFAS yet. For the Pine River, we had fish collected back in 2023. Those species included rock bass, bluegill, and crappie. Based on the levels that came back for those 3 species, we decided to issue a do not eat advisory for all species. Carp were tested back in 1992. At that time, they were not tested for PFOS, but again, based on those elevated levels of PFOS that we were seeing in other species, we decided to extend the do not eat advisory to all species. Similar to Lake St. Clair, we've been including fish consumption guidelines for the St. Clair River in our Eat Safe Fish Guides for a long time. And let's see, got some notes here. So most recently, we collected fish out of the St. Clair River in 2023. That included rock bass, largemouth bass, and smallmouth bass. Those were all tested for PFAS. In 2016, we collected carp that were tested for PFAS, and then as well as yellow perch. And then in 2012, we collected walleye from St. Clair River and connecting waterways, and those were tested for PFAS as well. So again, this is a situation where not every species on St. Clair River has been tested for PFAS. So you can see that the chemicals of concern that are driving our fish consumption guidelines include PFAS for some species, but not all. There's also legacy contamination issues for some other contaminants that are responsible for those fish consumption guidelines. And last but not least, William P. Thompson Pond, as we've been talking about. Sunfish were collected in 2023, and based on those levels, we issued a do not eat advisory for all species. And just wanted to include this information. If you're familiar with our Eat Safe Fish guides, you'll see information about the 3 C's, which is basically ways to decrease the amount of chemicals that you're ingesting from fish. So basically cleaning the fish in ways to get rid of fat, and cooking the fish in ways to get rid of fat, just because some chemicals do like to hang out in the fat of the fish. Unfortunately, when PFAS is an issue, or when mercury is an issue, they don't hang out in the fat of the fish, they hang out in the muscle or the protein. So you can't actually follow the 3 C's when PFAS is the concern. So unfortunately, that does not apply to a lot of the fish consumption guidelines that we have for this area. And with that, I will turn it back over. Thanks.
So for many of you, the time you've been waiting for is to ask questions. So I want to point out that we are recording this, so it is recorded and it will be available for people to access. Also, as I said, slides will be available. We have to have your email address though to get those slides to you. So if you can make sure that you sign the register out front, that would help us out immensely. We also have people online that are listening, and they probably, do you have any questions, Jim, from our online folks? Not yet, but I'm sure we will. So all you need to do is either raise your hand or stand up. I'll bring a mic to you. You can ask away, and we'll have one of our staff here tonight answer your question. I did the microphone is on. I don't think this is on. Push the button on it. Yeah, well, there we go. Oh, okay, great. Okay, questions? Way over here. I'm doing fine.
Good. My name's Gary Lopez. I live in Kimball Township. My question is, this is all great data, but are we notifying companies in this county that could be contributing as they pump things into the oxygen supply, they dump things into our water supply, and we have like Thompson Pond. That's the one over on 40th Street. I shared with Dr. Nevin, if you look at the property, it butts right against an old junkyard. How much soil do you think is in that earth that's just leaching into that pond? I would guess a lot. So I mean, that's stuff I want to know. Are we letting companies know? Are we holding people accountable? I brought up a lot of issues to landfill. How much is that landfill contributing to toxins in our surface water? We know how water evaporates. The landfill's full of water. Stuff evaporates and it just dumps all over our land. It dumps all over our bodies, all over our kids, all over our lives. So are we letting these agencies and letting the state know, hey, the stuff we've been doing, guess what? It's starting to add up. It's starting to come to fruition, and we're not happy. So I just sent my dad a message. He eats fish constantly. I'm like, hey, maybe you shouldn't, because the big boss, they're telling us not. So that's what I'm doing.
Who would like to answer the question about what do we do? How do we investigate? Where are we going? What are we looking for? So probably both and probably we'll start with A.
Would you want to talk with MPART or about MPART investigations or?
Well, I would start with what do you folks do in Water Resources Division? Typical day in Water Resources Division in Southeast Michigan, you're out and about looking at industries, doing inspections, doing permits. So that's a great question. What are we doing about that? So you could speak a little bit.
Well, specifically for here, so when you say the landfill, are you talking the Smith Creek landfill,
Yeah.
closed landfill?
We know what's in Fort Pratt. We don't want to talk. Julep rats don't think from there. When you talk about the mercury in that pond over there, people would say, oh, we love that pond. You know what that pond is? That pond's there for specific reasons, part of a landfill. So like Mueller Grass, I had a friend that worked in Mueller Grass in the 70s. Scary things we dump in that landfill, you don't ever want to open that landfill. It's like a wasp. Open it up, lots of problems.
Well, thankfully, both landfills are regulated by the state, not by Water Resources Division, but Materials Management Division regulates the Smiths Creek landfill, and the Remediation and Redevelopment Division regulates the closed Fort Gratiot landfill. So the leachate that is produced from Smiths Creek, that actually is discharged to the Port Huron wastewater treatment plant. And there is treatment at Smiths Creek for PFAS. So they are treating it and reducing the amount of PFAS that they are discharging to Smiths Creek. But happy to take further information about Thompson Pond. I, didn't know about the soil there, so feel free to get a hold of me.
Well, that's another thing I shared with Dr. Heaven. There's an old landfill over off of the Pier Road. There's an entire residence built. You can't find information. I know for a fact it's there. So I've got a friend that grew up in that area. And if you look at the land, there's a funeral, literally a cemetery back. Look at the land. My source who lived there, that whole area is full of garbage. What kind of garbage? I mean, I've got a friend, he does cleanouts. And he's constantly dumping things in his containers. Things that shouldn't be in a landfill. And that's one person. So I think a lot of it has to do with citizen responsibility of taking things to the right places. Sure. And it's been so different before. We talked about it. We can't just take things away without re-educating. And I think that's a lot of things in a lot of society. People aren't educated, so they just don't know. I mean, it's like pigs don't know they stink. Well, if someone doesn't know, they don't know. I mean, people still try to put styrofoam in recycling it, even though it's not included. So I'm a big advocate for being healthy. And I'm seeing the world around me not take it serious. I mean, I hear what you're saying, the state's in charge of things, the state's in charge of that. Well, I mean, that doesn't give us a lot of affirmation because the state's not really that responsible, and we see that. I mean, the landfill is epic disaster. There's just things in that landfill, just like the Fort Gratiot landfill, they should have never been allowed to be there. And they're there, and they're going to sit there and just have rainwater just keep pouring over it and dumping it into this leachate system. I don't know who thought of these systems, but they're not working. So we need to look at how we can invest in new systems that give us better results, because the results aren't coming to fruition for the betterment of our health. So I think I speak for a lot of people. The community is very frustrated with, I don't know who did it, but somebody dropped the ball. So, and I think it's great that we're all coming together and seeing it, because maybe it's time for a shift in leadership. Maybe it's time for a shift in people holding more people accountable, because I'm not happy. My son, everything's about health with us. We look at everything. And like I said, I think I speak on behalf of the whole community. It's not okay. And we have to start making better decisions. I worked at the paper mill in Port Huron for 13 years. The things I watched go in that landfill, they should have never been put there. And they're sitting there, rotting away, pouring to depths of the landfill, and who knows where they're going. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I thank you for coming. I'm happy to provide you with the MMD contact that regulates. That's a municipal type 2 solid waste landfill, so they are allowed to take industrial waste. But I am not the expert. I don't work in that division. I'm happy to pass along the contact. But I do appreciate your concern and your comments. If you have Thompson Pond more information, please reach out to me. Appreciate it.
Good tip. Thank you for the Thompson Pond tip. Really appreciate that. Yes.
Hi, my name is Melissa Kibble. I actually have 2 questions here. One is in regard to the Eat Safe Fish guidelines. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded as though The last time walleye from the St. Clair River were tested, it sounded like they were captured in 2012. And I guess my question is, how often are the fish getting tested for those heat safe fish guidelines?
Yeah, the last time that fish were collected, from the area, including the St. Clair River, was 2012. At that time, they were tested for PFAS. As far as how often fish get tested from a water body, like how often Eagle goes back, the answer is it depends. When we're talking about PFAS, unless there's been some kind of remediation done to the water body, we wouldn't really expect to see a decreasing trend. So it's really just dependent on the water body and what's happening around it.
Second question, you were discussing the leachate getting treated for PFAS and PFAS being removed. Can you tell me more about the methodology behind that and how do you remove PFAS from water?
I am not the expert on that. I can give you, I can redirect you to that person, but I use, so some of the new technology that's coming out are PFAS destruction technology. So rather than moving PFAS around in that cycle like Mike was talking about, it's actually destroying the PFAS or concentrating the PFAS and destroying it. Totally blanking on what Smith's Creek has.
Foam fractionation.
Thank you. So maybe, yeah, Mikey, if we want to talk about it.
Yeah. So at Smith's Creek, they use a technique called foam fractionation. And if you wash dishes by hand, you'll know that if you put dishwashing detergent in your water and you agitate it, it makes foam. So what we do to take PFAS out of the water, it is a surfactant. So what they do is they blow air. The simplest way to explain it is we blow air through the water and that makes foam. And then we collect that foam and the foam has the PFAS in it. It's a very efficient way of taking PFAS out. So the second question I think you're going to ask is, okay, now that we've got it out of there, what do we do with it? So there are multiple ways to take care of PFAS. There is using heat. So you can incinerate it at a very high temperature. You can use different methods of, I'm going to try to think of how I can say this without getting too scientific. So we can use different types of electrical methods to destroy that bond. So there are what we call cold plasma. There are different types of ways to destroy it. Another way is to use UV light. And so there are ways. So years ago, and not that many years ago, there weren't good ways to do things. One of the interesting things about contamination is entrepreneurs start thinking about it and everybody wants to make $1, so they come up with ways to do this. Back a few years ago, if you'd asked me, there aren't many ways to do it. Nowadays, there are many, but the foam fractionation system they use at Smith's Creek is a well-known and very well-used system across the world. So not just in the United States, but Australia and other countries. So foam fractionation is a system that works. And I believe you had another question too.
Those were my two questions.
Oh, okay. Do we have other audience members that have questions? Jim, do we have anything online?
No, we don't.
Okay, good.
This is Vance Richardson, I'm with Fort Gratiot. I have a question or two, which kind of let me lead into it if I may. I live on Cold Road and not far from walking distance of Brace Road. Large drainage ditch on Brace Road goes right within a mile, right into this large agricultural field. And I watch truckload and truckload and truckload counter being shipped over to this huge field. And I also watch on Metcalf, huge ditch that goes right into fields that are going to be solar farms. Likewise, the ones where I live, those fields are going to be solar farms. And the ditch on Metcalf runs over to a substation in Clyde. It surrounds the substation in Clyde, runs straight down Metcalf into the lake, through a solar field, through 80 acres, may I add, woodlands that was destroyed. So that solar leases exist on it. On Grace Road, all along Grace Road is gonna be solar fields. Now, we already have contamination of E. coli right over here at the lighthouse, right up here on Lakeside. All along these beaches are contaminated with E. coli. And I'm watching truckload of farm column, I can smell it. Go right by my house, right over there on Grace Road, within a mile of the Great Lakes. Now you say, what's that have to do with our topic tonight? Well, I'm reading about solar panels. Do solar panels have PFAS? Why, yes. I'll be darned, they do. They use them on the coatings, they use them on the back panels, they use them on the wires. And we're looking at thousands of acres, all by the Great Lakes, all where these streams feed into the Great Lakes. What's being done about it? I brought this up at meeting after meeting after meeting. Oh, Fort Gratiot, we got a good handle on this. Heck, they can't even put in a campground without destroying some wetlands right next to the landfill. And then the drainage ditch goes right by the solar farms that are proposed that go right into Grace Road. So what is being done? Keep an eye on this. We don't want to see all these thousands of acres of solar panels put up and then, oh, geez, yeah, there is some PFAS in there. Are they tested before then? Are we testing the soil? Are we monitoring the system? And by the way, it's a hide and seek game of who owns what development that goes into here. It's Ranger Power who starts up another little company that starts up another little company. It's a shell game. None of them have any money. And where are they LLC'd out of? Oh, Connecticut or somewhere, not Michigan. So it's a hide and seek game. And there's no regulation. It seems like you keep an eye on these characters before they start messing up and destroying farmland, driving in steel posts, destroying the farmland that's got common manure, fertilizer, weed killer all over it that runs right into the Great Lakes. Yes, I can walk on Grace Road from the solar farm field proposed to the Great Lake. It's right within a mile. And then there was a fire in North Street this summer. It took 3 fire departments to put out a little field of hay. And you say, what's that have to do with that substation over in Clyde? God forbid if that had a fire and down Metcalf Road's that huge ditch, it goes right into the Great Lakes. So there's an alarm there. I don't know the answers. I certainly have questions. And don't think that Fort Gratiot's monitoring anything because they're not. We're watching just ridiculous things going on. And you can see right now, a campground, $3.5 million. Oh, well, we're not going to put it up now. But they've already destroyed wetlands. They're already under penalty by Eagle. We're doing that. Now, what are they going to do about these solar farms that rubber stamped without any thought, without any consideration of contamination or financial means to take care of these problems, or fire departments, or the sprays you're going to use, or the transformers, or the wires, and the panels, and the contamination. So that's my question. Who's going to jump on this? Who's going to watch these characters? Who's going to try and railroad this thing so it goes the right direction and not into our Great Lakes like the Commodore is?
Thank you. I would say that you're asking a question that we'll need to do some research on. And that's not a great answer. I understand that. But you bring up a subject that we'll have to figure out who is it at Eagle that does that type of regulation on that. I don't know. And I'm not going to lie to you. That's why I say I don't know. But we will, hopefully you'll give us your name so that we can look into that and get back to you, because the question deserves an answer and you want one, we will get you one.
Yes, and I'd like the answer to go to the St. Clair County Board of Commissioners as well. Because I think they certainly deserve an answer. That whole panel there needs to know, and the health department as well, Dr. Devin as well. they need to know, what are we doing to contain this and to monitor it? So we don't fight this after the water's gone over the dam.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's, yeah, so as I said, make sure you get with us so we can have your name, so we can get back to you. Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
I was at a previous meeting on this topic, and a question I asked them that I'm gonna ask today because there's new faces here is, I know that you're testing the fish, but is there any other species that you're testing? And should be this community, you know, for hunters? And I'm just wondering about, you know, deer, rabbits, that sort of thing.
Lisa will be happy to answer that.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming forward with that. It's something that we're currently looking into. We're gonna have further internal talks to talk about potentially sampling wild game in this area. So I would be very interested in hearing what hunters in this area actually go for. And what species. Yeah, that's a great interest to me. So get with me afterwards and we can talk.
Yeah, statewide, we have done deer testing, so there's a lot of data on deer and some other species across the state. But it's not specific to you here. So yes, it would be great if you can give us some ideas of what's going on with that, so that we can get you answers. Other audience members, yes, sir. Here, one more. Sure.
So years ago, we had the situation with Domtar where they were dumping their contaminated pulp at the composting station over on Dove. Have we started researching the paper trail of where that soil ended up throughout the county? That's one. And then two, I think unity is super important. And I wonder if we work together with the Canadian government to do test comparisons versus deep water fish in the lake and different distances, and then also collaborating with local fishermen. I've got some friends that are heavy fishermen, and could we collaborate with them and say, hey, listen, we want you to partner with us. We want to see that you can give us fish and basically be the hands and feet of Eagle to help make our waterways better. So that's what I got for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you do the first?
Jim, anybody online yet? No. Okay.
So I can speak a little bit to Technicom. I think you might have come in after I spoke about it. So Domtar currently is doing work out there. They are removing the soil piles and taking it to Ontario, Canada. As far as tracing it out to the community, they don't have records of that, so we're not able to trace it specifically to specific areas in the community, fortunately. Did that answer your question about how?
I mean, yeah, but moving forward, I think it's important that we would hold companies like Technicom accountable, saying, hey, we're paper trail, right? Like, if I get someone sick for my food truck, I'll try to contact us and say, hey, we want to see where that food is. And I have that record, right? Where's the record? Why don't I have that doctor, a multi-million-dollar company? I do. And here's one of the reasons it's important to me. I'm the one that reported that. But I'm the one that turned all that in. So when nothing happened for 4 years, 4 years later, 4 years, all those people in the community received how much contaminated soil. That means something. It means something to do with the fact that what's happening. Why aren't people taking action? So.
Excuse me, my name is Tim Wojciechowski, and I was the previous project manager on Technicom before Cynthia. Unfortunately, the rules and regulations, Technicom didn't have to keep records of the person coming and picking up the compost or the local landscape guy. They didn't have to, and they didn't. So there's no way of going back and getting that, unfortunately, that information. We wish we had it because it did get taken. Actually, fortunately, Technicom wasn't selling their stuff fast enough. So luckily a lot of it stayed on site.
Do you know what was in that? Do you know what was in that?
In the compost.
Yeah.
I walked in it.
Heavily hazardous, cancer causing.
Yes, because, so they were, MMD, our materials management division, gave them a NERC designation to Damitar, or Damitar, they said itself was a NERC back when they didn't have to test for PFAS. So they got the NERC designation. They were allowed to take their paper waste to Technicons because it was considered a NERC material, which it wasn't. It had PFAS in it. But then, as soon as we found that out in 2018-19, we stopped them Damitar from dumping their paper waste into Technicons compost.
They lied though.
They did, and that's why we went after them and won.
That is lying because from the time I started working at Gunna, 2006, we were told specifically the product that goes in that is highly cancerous.
Yeah, we found emails through our discovery, and that's why we took, we ended up not going forward mediating and getting the agreement. But there was a NERC designation, so we were also worried about going to court that maybe they would side with them and say, well, these guys said it was a NERC and they would have no responsibility. So it was a fine line, and we felt we got the best for the community. And the biggest thing was getting all that piles taken off of there, and every time it rains and snow melts, that runs into the local surface waters there. So it's not perfect. It's not, they wish we were going to clean up the sediments too, but they're going to test them. And hopefully we have that extra money and we can also then clean up the sediments outside too.
Lisa can answer his second question. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Cynthia.
Yeah, and your second question, I have two slightly different answers for. Your first was like, are we working with the Canadian government? And we do. So the Michigan Fish Consumption Advisory Program is part of the Great Lakes Consortium for Fish Consumption Advisories, which includes fish consumption program managers from all of the Great Lakes states, as well as Ontario and tribal communities as well. So we actually just had our annual meeting last week where we get together, we talk about what each of us is doing, how our results look, like especially on shared water bodies such as the Great Lakes and the connecting channels. So myself and others from Michigan are part of a sub-work group of that consortium called the Harmonizing Advisories, trying to see like how our data is the same and where it may differ. So we do work very closely with Ontario on that. And then as far as your second question about like working with local anglers, for data to be incorporated into our Eat Safe Fish program, it does have to go through our MDHHS Bureau of Laboratories. That's just the way to make sure that the fish are being collected and processed in the same way every time, so that we can assure good quality data that we're getting out.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I live dead center in the middle of where the contamination is in Port Huron Township. I go to the township meetings, and I did ask at one meeting, what is our corporate attorney, our township board doing? And basically it was a standstill. What I'd like to know is, with this lawsuit that people settled with our attorney general, what are you guys doing to help our township financially recover from this? 40th Street Pond with Thompson Pond is a big draw for us, and now we're labeled as a contaminated area. So I'd like to know, is Dana Nessel or Governor Whitmer going to contact our township supervisor or our corporate attorney and help us? It is going to devastate our township, and we are at the point now we're trying to build our township up, make it a lovely place to come and visit and have fun and have families. This is a huge negative. So I'd like someone to answer, what is the upper people in the state going to do to help our township? If you don't know, you can say you don't know.
So for Thompson Pond, we don't have a connection at this time that Technicomp is responsible for the contamination. So that's, you know, as I talked about today, we don't know the source or the sources for the Thompson Pond that triggered the do not eat and in the elevated surface water. We don't have anyone to go after. We don't know what the source is at this time, unfortunately, and that's why one of the reasons the goal of this meeting, right, is to come here, talk to folks, see what you know, give us some ideas about where to investigate. We'll do additional sampling next year. But right, unfortunately, that, you know, and the main point again is protecting public health and the environment. So that's why we did the residential well sampling in the area to ensure people who are on residential wells that their drinking water is protected, and it is. So again, probably another unsatisfactory answer at this time, but we'll keep working and we'll keep holding these public meetings to inform you of our investigation. I appreciate your question.
Other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Sandra Richardson, and I have a fairly decent sized family farm in Fort Gratiot, which my husband had spoke earlier. And I guess, you know, I know what your purpose is of being here today for the pond and all the problems we're having with PFAS in the area. But over 2 years ago, we brought this up at our meeting here in the convention center because we had some engineers, private engineers that do fishing and are retired from the United States government their whole life. They're retired for being in the service. They fish in our waters. They're concerned about the contamination of the waters out in Fort Gratiot. They brought that up at our meetings. They brought it up at our township meetings. We had over 600 people here at the convention center sounding off alarms. Please do more research investigation with all of your brilliance and your education and toxicology degrees. And no one took it of interest in our own community. So we're asking why it wasn't taken of interest at the state level when they were going full charge ahead to put in all these solar fields to help the environment. Well, you can't help the environment when you're destroying the Great Lakes that we're also blessed to live so close to. We should be, it's insulting to the community, it's insulting to professionals like you to see the race to go forward with these developments when well-educated people brought it to your attention and to the state's attention. So my concern is how can we have faith in what you're doing over there to regulate these problems when no one listened to us and hasn't listened to us, including our local governments, for over 2 years. We had to beg and plead, and thank God our local health department brought it to our community's attention that maybe this wasn't such a great idea to pour in on the rural communities and create another problem with the PFAS that's already so close to our Great Lakes, so close to our farmlands, and to just turn your head and ignore this and to allow these projects to continue without further investigation is disgusting. If you can sit there as well-educated people and think that your state people have done their due diligence to push buttons, I welcome you to come out to our farmlands and my private farm and see the area that my husband was talking to you about, where we could go for a walk from our farm to the Great Lakes and watch what goes in these drainage ditches that well-educated people that gave up their entire life, engineers for our country, brought to the attention of our local government and said they've tested the water in these streams and there's PFAS in the water. And you're going to put more into our Great Lakes. So that's my concern, is how can we have faith in what you're doing, and I don't mean you personally, but what our state government is doing to our beautiful environment in Great Lakes that we've been gifted to live so close to. So thank God for our local health department that had to put regulations in against some of these projects because it wasn't happening at the state level, and it doesn't give me much confidence in what you're trying to do and probably trying to do a good job what you have in your hands. But we've been let down on this, and I do want to follow up on it. I am concerned about the PFAS in the drainage ditches that has been tested so close to these sites. So I'm asking for someone to look into that. I did bring this up at a previous meeting out in Kimball Township. I brought it up at our local government in our community. And so it does need further research by our state. And our community's asking for that. And we're not sitting here to watch commercials on how great this is going to be for our community when we know better. So it is your job. And the other question I have, because I went to a local meeting at our township in a destroyed area that was destroyed for their wetlands. And I understood, if I'm correct, there was PFAS in some of the ditches that run along this proposed public park for our children. And I just am asking you, if you knew that was tested and it had PFAS in it, would you put up a sign at that park and say, you know, because my kids growing up would have played in any ditch or drain because it looked, you know, like something fun to do and look for polybugs. So would you put a sign up at an area where you had a public park that you knew had PFAS in it and the kids weren't going to drink in it, but they were going to have hand-to-mouth contamination from playing in that park? I don't know of an area in Port Huron, to be honest with you, based on that landfill that I would put another park in this area. I think that time, honestly, when I see families playing in it, should have signs all over it. And I think that is a concern for me. So if there's your families and you live within 300 feet of a proposed solar project that drains into all of our wells and our Great Lakes, how concerned would you be with the PFAS that's already been tested in a lot of these lakes and or streams that run right into our Great Lakes?
Signs, I think, do we have signs at Thompson Park for no fishing? Okay. So we do have signs at Thompson Park for do not eat the fish. And because I'm not from the area, I'm not familiar with this proposed park. Is if there was a surface water body nearby that had high levels, I would think we would try to put signage up, but that's also up to your local governmental agency to look at that also. So once again, we don't have good answers for you, but we will get back with you. Is your name on the list up front so that we have a way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's not just about the parks, but it's about these proposed areas also in our community that our community is concerned about the whole project and the PFAS in the drainage, and it's mostly into our Great Lakes. It's disgusting.
Yes, good points. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience tonight?
Mike, we just want to follow up on the drainage, like the kids playing.
Okay, sure.
I don't know.
I was just gonna say, at certain locations around the state, we have issued signage regarding avoiding foam. Because there have been, like, you know, the foam that washes up on the shoreline can sometimes contain PFAS. So we have issued avoid foam signs in certain areas of the state. And really the concern there is not just for PFAS, it's also for other gross things that, you know, wash up in that foam, like E. coli and other bacteria. But as far as other signage that we provide would be for fish consumption advisories. We do have do not eat signage available. We provide the opportunities for local units of government, local health departments to put those signs up. They know where the best places that people go fishing in those locations, so they know the best spots to put those signs. So they put those signs up for us. We also have signage for our Eat Safe Fish program that just provides like general fish consumption information. So we are undergoing putting more signs around the state that has our general Eat Safe Fish information as well.
Thank you. And unfortunately, you will be our last person because we have a hard stop on how long we have to move forward.
So this has to do with the landfill, fine of St. Clair County under, so we reached out to Eagle for help. And then you did help us, but then the entire county had to endure a fine. I get that, but at the same time, the citizens and the taxpayers should not have to be fined because of maybe 12 or 15 or however many people had gross negligence. If we're at a job and we don't perform well, we get fired. In that situation, I don't think anyone was fired. Those people continue to do their jobs, even though they cost the county tons of money, tons of problems, a headache to you. So I would question, is Eagle doing anything about, again, following a paper trail of who's responsible for the gross negligence that took place at that landfill? And are they gonna be held accountable? So, like, if I get someone sick from food poisoning, I'm punished. Where's the punishment? Because the last I checked, the only people that got punished was the tax base, all those people that are paying taxes. So I understand you have to do that. There's rules and regulations, but where are the rules and regulations for the people actually responsible?
Right, so the county owns the landfill, you know, they hold the license, and again, unfortunately, we are not the experts up here, we don't work in the materials management division that oversees the license for Smiths Creek. So I can, again, if you contact me, I can give you the MMV staff person, who's the compliance person for Smiths Creek. Unfortunately, I can't answer those questions because I don't work in that program, but we hear you, and again, I'm happy to pass on the appropriate contact person.
I want to thank all of you who spent time with us tonight and took the time to come here, air your concerns. One of the things that we hope as you talk to your neighbors and friends in the area, if they remember something that they saw, they heard, something they may have photos of, whatever, dealing with these areas around the county, let us know. And it sounds trite, the old saying, if you see something, say something. But in this case, if you saw something or you know somebody that saw something, let us know. A lot of the work that we do and a lot of the good stuff we do comes from citizens that take the time to let us know, I saw something, I know something. So if that is your case, please let us know, and we will follow up with those. Jim, was there any last questions from our online folks?
Just checking in, there wasn't. No.
Okay, so I want to thank our online folks too for bearing with us through this. If you are interested in getting the presentation, as I said, please make sure that you sign in and give us your email address. That presentation will be made available. The presentation also has been recorded, and that will be available. While we're working to clean up the area here, if you have further questions that you would like to ask panelists, please do so. We'd be happy to help out and try to answer what we can. We don't know everything, but we know a lot of people, and we'll try to get answers for you. So once again, thank you so much for your attention, and we really appreciate you showing up.
Thank you.